House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 6, Smallfolk, again shows both the positives and negatives of this season of House of the Dragon. For every good thing about this episode, there was something poor or utterly out of left field that makes little sense in the context of the story or even the characters that the writers have created. One of the biggest criticisms of Season 2 is that the pacing is all over the place, with some episodes feeling like the show is just trying to tread water until it's time for the next big event. To some extent, this is true, but I think it goes a lot deeper than that. Namely, if they wanted the characters they established and largely marketed as the main characters of the story in Rhaenrya and Alicent, then they were frankly going to have to find things for them to do during Season 2. I knew going into Season 2, based on both Rhaenyra and Alicent's roles in the books, it was going to be tough to make them an active part of the story to the same extent they were during Season 1. Frankly, once Viserys dies, the likes of Criston Cole, Aegon, Aemond, Jace and Corlys become much more central to the story and really keep the wheels turning. Thus why over the season there has been a sense of frustration from viewers that not much seems to be happening, having to divert so much screen time to characters who are supposed to be the main characters of the show who seemingly have very little to actually do this season. Now here's the thing, some of these added elements for Rhaenyra and Alicent are very good and fun to watch. When it comes down to it, I don't really think they add much to the story, but they don't necessarily detract from it either. Hence why many fans have found the Black Council scenes, where it seems like they're having the same conversation each week, quite boring compared to the Green Council scenes, where the plot is actually evolving and moving quite quickly. I think Daemon's arc this season can help show this issue very clearly. Now, I do enjoy Daemon's arc personally, because I love seeing this magical side of Westeros. 1 or 2 dream sequences would have been fine, but it's been most of his role this season. But again, this speaks to the wider issue the writers were always going to have to deal with. Daemon was a fan favourite character. There is no world he was going to have reduced screen time this season. They were going to find a way to stretch out his role across the season. The problem is, in the books, Daemon's whole Season 2 arc is maybe a page or 2 at best. Issues such as this, of having to stretch out a small amount of source material for some characters across a season, is going to be the root cause of the pacing issues. I do suspect that going into Season 3, it should actually be less of an issue as the story contracts slightly and the big name characters do actually have a more active role. The trouble is, this part of Fire and Blood, very much King's Landing, green focused as they make their first moves, while Rhaenyra is still kind of recuperating from her personal losses on Dragonstone. Hence why I think the stories felt quite unbalanced to some degree. Yes, the pacing has been an issue, but it is something personally that doesn't bother me that much. I don't mind the slow burn stuff. Maybe it helps that I know where the story is going from the books, and while I have had my criticisms of the show this season, on balance I have enjoyed watching it. But this led me to an interesting question. If the general audience is complaining about the pace of the show this season, like it apparently seemed from what I've seen on social media, it does make me wonder if David Benioff and D.B. Weiss were in fact correct to basically abandon most of A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons in their adaptation of Game of Thrones. Between those books, there was easily 3 to 4 seasons of content, which they managed to breeze through in a single season by cutting most of the new storylines and characters. I personally hate they did this, but it does make me wonder if they had adapted the book properly, would fans have had similar complaints about the pacing they do with House of the Dragon, given the show would have faced similar issues with most of the main cast and story hardly progressing while dozens of new elements and characters are introduced. Don't get me wrong, I wish they had adapted them properly, but this discourse has got me wondering about how audiences at the time would have reacted to the likes of Jon, Daenerys and Tyrion getting much reduced screen time, but seasons at a time. The opening scene to the episode was really fun to me. It's about time we got to see the Lannister army, with it being something I assumed we would have got more of a look of by this time. The armour looks great and I much prefer it to the Game of Thrones style. The fact they have actually brought lions on the march with them is utterly mad. Will they use them in battle? How do they control them? How do they stop them killing their own men? I really hope we get these answers and we get to see it. What I like about Jason Lannister as he really gets across the more arrogant side of the Lannisters, where Tyland does seem a lot more humble and smart, in a way reflecting qualities seen across all the Lannisters in Game of Thrones, between the both of them. It was also wonderful to hear the Lannister motif with the Rains of Castamere. I know a few people complained about it being used, as the Rain Tarback rebellion had not happened yet in the timeline, and won't for decades, but I think it's such an iconic part of the Lannister identity in the show. It was obvious they were going to play into it. During this first Green Council scene, where they are reacting to Jason asking for backup from Aemond, you can really see Aemond relishing his new position of power. It's really a side of the character we've not seen yet. He really does come across as truly villainous, while at the same time wanting to win the war for his side's cause. He seems very self-assured and confident in what he's doing, and there does seem to be a real sense of unease amongst the members of the Small Council, the very men who suggested he take the position of regent in the first place, almost as if they're starting to fear him, or see the kind of ruler he would become if he ever did become king in his own right. The Small Council do start to push back, but only slightly. When ordering Criston Cole to march on Harrenhal, you can really see Cole's reluctance. He knows it's not a good idea. He knows Aemond is being reckless, but obeys the order regardless, dutiful to his lord. Alicent's scene with Aemond after the council is also hugely telling. She very well knows what Aemond is becoming and can see the untempered fury within him. Her actions during the Small Council scene shows a woman who knows she's hanging on to influence by her fingernails. But still, when it finally happens and she's stripped of the little power and influence she had left by Aemond, she really does seem defeated somewhat, maybe even fearful of what will happen now. This of course happens a lot sooner in the books, but it has been interesting to watch Alicent slowly lose control of the Small Council over the season. When she tries to comfort Aemond, it somewhat all fits well with the theme of her story this episode, with her questioning if she's a good mother. Is she to blame to who her sons have become? Then we have the Black Council, with Corlys now firmly in place as Hand of the Queen. We didn't get any confrontation between Rhaenyra and Corlys in regards to Rhaenys death, but within the context of the way the show has portrayed her choice to go to Rook's Rest, I guess it kinda makes sense. But mostly, this scene is about Rhaenyra and the dragonseed plotline. Now in the book, Steffon Darklyn and his relation to House Targaryen is utterly non-existent. This idea of his grandmother's grandmother being a Targaryen princess is a show invention, being a made-up Targaryen 4 generations back might just about place the supposed Targaryen pre-Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters. Maybe it could be an unknown sister of Aerion Targaryen, Aegon's father. What gets confusing is if this were the case, given it was pre-conquest, she would not have been given the title of princess as in the show, which does suggest this apparent Targaryen princess is post-conquest, which doesn't fit into the show canon or the book at all. I'm not going to read too deep into this. It's just a throwaway line, like all the made-up Targaryen kings and lords Game of Thrones had for plot reasons. But regardless, in the show, Steffon has a hint of Targaryen blood, and that is used to justify him trying to claim a dragon. I get why they made this change, as it spells out to the audience very clearly what the idea behind the sowing is. But I do like that in the books, Steffon, without a drop of dragon blood, just volunteers himself, seeing it as his duty as a Queen's Guard. And I will say this, the actor who played Steffon did an amazing job with this scene. This episode has 2 more Daemon dream sequences, which, like I've said before, I personally love, but understand why most fans have started to get bored of them, given they have made up 90% of his Season 2 screen time so far. In both, it was great to have Paddy Considine back for these cameos. His presence this season has been greatly missed, and I'm glad we got to see more of him one last time. Regardless as to if people feel these were 2 dream sequences too many, they did finally complete the journey Daemon needed to go on to develop and let his character grow into the kind of man Rhaenyra needs to fight this war. Him coming to terms with his own mistakes and taking responsibility for his actions. This really is going to be a big reset button on Daemon, and a positive change for his character, with his motivations more closely aligned with Rhaenyra's. I think Daemon's apology to Viserys was also an extremely touching moment during that second dream sequence. It really was the last piece of the puzzle. I am surprised we never got a dream or appearance of Rhaenrya, so I assume Daemon genuinely does not feel any guilt or remorse over her death, to the point she doesn't even register in his psyche at this point. Something that does strike me as a little bit odd is that Daemon questions Simon Strong about maybe poisoning him or being responsible for his dreams, when I thought it was very bloody clear it was Alys Rivers. I assumed that Daemon already knew this too, but was just kind of rolling with it. That part does stick out to me, but is very minor in the wider picture of the story. The scene following after, where Daemon is about to set off on Caraxes, only to be stopped by Alys, was maybe one of my favourites of the episode. I really like the dynamic between Alys and Daemon. She's a lot less hostile to him than I thought she was going to be this season, given what we know about how her story pans out. It does make me wonder and look forward to how she acts with a certain other character in the story to come. But all of this does get me questioning Alys's motivations and what she really wants or is after. I didn't expect her to actively help Daemon with the Riverlords, or with becoming a better person via his dreams. So for now, I think it's very clear that Alys is very much Team Alys, with her own agenda, and I can't wait to see how this plays out. I truly hope they don't fuck this part up. I think it's clear that her power is related to the Old Gods and the Weirwoods. The inclusion of her owl does make me think she could be some kind of skin changer, or perhaps even a green seer, given that how strong does have First Men blood. I do, however, have a really bad feeling they may try and tie her into Aegon's prophecy somehow. Now, I loved the scene of Steffon Darklyn attempting to claim Seasmoke. In the book, when someone tries to claim a dragon, there doesn't seem to be an established method of how to do it. They just seem to go about it how they think is best. So I like the show has given us a Valyrian method of doing so with the song. I do like the inclusion of Valyrian lore like this, because even in the book still, there's still so much we don't know about Valyria. Steffon does seem quite close to claiming Seasmoke, with his overconfidence in the end maybe getting the better of him. But Steffon and the Dragonkeeper's death was horrific. I think it really gets across to viewers the sheer danger of claiming a dragon. It's sad because Steffon did seem like a really nice guy, very loyal, but I guess he needed to be for this lesson to mean anything. This is followed by a scene of Corlys asking Alyn to be his first mate, something which Alyn doesn't seem keen on, not wanting position just because he's the bastard son of Corlys. What's interesting here is even though it's very clear Corlys is angling to bring him into the Velaryon fold, Corlys and Alyn have still not acknowledged their relationship to each other yet on screen, and makes me wonder what Corlys' long-term plan with this situation is. Addam seems to be pushing his brother to welcome the advancement in his position, while indicating that Corlys seems to have no time for Addam, which is interesting given events to come. Maybe Corlys doesn't believe Addam to be his son. Only time will tell. But in a little scene later on between the two brothers of Hull, we see Alyn shaving his head, which confirms to us that the reason that he's doing so is to hide his silver hair. If Addam is Corlys' son as well, he appears to have taken after his mother, which certainly makes the dragonseed aspect more compelling. So far, there has been no mention of their mother, Myrrilda of Hull. I suspect we will get one sooner or later, but I don't think we will see her on screen. I suspect maybe she's dead in the show, which is why Corlys has the obligation to look out for Alyn and Addam in a way he doesn't in the book by this stage, giving Alyn a place in his crew and so forth. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. I'm still baffled as to why they've swapped the ages of Addam and Alyn by making Alyn the elder brother. Maybe they had a good reason. Maybe it's just because they like the actors, so changed it. Who knows? But I hope we do get an answer. The inn scene is more important than people think. Just as much as the idea of the food shortages, it's going to play a huge role in setting up events that we will see in Season 3. It's clear to me that the brothel madam is working with Mysaria, and the serving girl Diana from Season 1 also has some kind of relationship with her too, I suspect. Without going into spoilers and trying to be a bit vague, I think this brothel madam and Diana will play a huge role in the Moon of Madness and a certain Daemon. It low-key sums up a lot of Season 2. There are lots of these random scenes like this that may seem like filler, but will prove to be vital setup for events to come. I have a feeling when all is said and done, when people look back at Season 2 after the show has finished, they may look back at some of these elements of the season much more favourably. The food situation in itself is interesting, and something that really confused my girlfriend greatly. She couldn't understand why the Smallfolk were starting to get angry with Aegon, Aemond and the Greens, when it's Rhaenyra and the Blacks who are blockading the gullet and causing the very food shortage. I mean, she's right, it did strike me a bit odd, but I think important to remember, Mysaria's whispers have been doing their work around King's Landing, sowing discontent and creating the narrative that Aegon and his court are directly to blame, rather than the person, blockading the harbour. I really don't think this comes across clearly in the show, but when you look at it with that context, it kind of starts to make sense. We then have a much smaller Green Council scene with Larys trying to position himself as Hand of the King. This kind of baffled me somewhat when I first watched it. Why would Aemon be naming anyone Hand of the King at this point? Yes, regents do have that power, but he's not indicated that he intends to remove Cole as Hand, and given they were partners in the planning of the war behind the council's back, it's all very out of place. Bringing Otto back into the fold does low-key make sense here, but in that case, why is Cole even still Hand? But putting this aside, it's great to see Larys overreaching and coming into contact with someone in Aemond that he can't manipulate for his own gain. But being put down like that is what I think directly leads to him seeking out Aegon later in the episode. Knowing he has no power over Aemond, he seeks out the next best option in the crippled Aegon. Now I want to say the acting in this scene, specifically for Larys, is phenomenal. It's odd seeing Larys get emotional like this, and I have seen a few people say it feels a little bit out of character, but I think the reality is he's using his own disability and likening himself to Aegon, showing himself as so vulnerable in the ultimate form of emotional manipulation. Yes, there may have been some true feelings and trauma behind Larys' emotion, but in this case, he's using it for his own gain. But let's just jump back for a sec. While we talk about Aegon, he's healing a lot faster than he did in the book, which I guess does make sense in the context of the story and the way the timeline of the dance is going to be changed. The scene between Aegon and Aemond is also very telling, but leaves me with more questions than answers. Does Aegon truly not recall what happened at Rook's Rest? Or is he lying out of fear of Aemond? Does Aemond really care about his brother in some capacity? Or is this all just a front to keep Aegon docile? Interviews with Ewan Mitchell lean towards what happened at Rook's Rest not strictly being intentional on Aemond's part, but with him perhaps capitalising on the situation. Again, we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. We'll also have a scene with Alicent watching over Aegon as he sleeps, where she seems remorseful for the part she played in causing his rash actions, and is another key piece in her questioning her ability as a mother, and maybe blaming herself for the way Aegon and Aemond have turned out. I'm working on a video about this, and the kind of mother Alicent was. It's a full-on character deep dive, and should be quite long, so keep an eye out for it in the coming weeks. The veiled scenes for me were very important this week in the sense that it appears that Rhaenrya is likely going to be getting most of Nettles' storyline from the book. It's something we've had rumours about for a long time, and I'd already accepted that fact a while ago, but this really is kind of starting to look like confirmation for me. It is something I have very mixed feelings about, as I love Nettles as a character and her role in the story is wonderful, but at the same time I get the appeal of giving some of her role to Rhaenrya. I guess once all is said and done and the season is over, we will truly be able to look back at the season as a whole and come to some kind of conclusion. But, and this is a huge but, there is still a slim chance this is a double bluff from the writers. We might still be getting Nettles in some way. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, as there's massive spoilers for people who have not read the books, many of whom I know watch these videos. To me, it's a slim chance, but a chance nonetheless. We just have to wait and see. I did also really like the setup for Aegon and Viserys being sent to Pentos and getting a little glimpse of Stormcloud. With the news that the Gullet is being likely pushed back to season 3 for budget reasons, I do wonder how this will impact the Aegon and Viserys element of it. Maybe there really won't be a time skip between season 2 and 3. Now, Rhaenyra's packages or gifts of food to the people at King's Landing is another one of those moments that left me feeling a bit conflicted. It's a very smart play to stoke rumours of Aegon's court eating and banqueting like kings, distracting with the fact it's actually Rhaenyra blocking the port, then giving the small folk the food they badly need to give Rhaenyra a huge PR boost. But at the same time, it's hard to ignore the very fact the whole reason there's a food shortage is down to Rhaenyra's very blockade. I guess the small folk are just so desperate for food by this point, they just forgot that element. But other than that, it's a really interesting idea and shows how you can still fight a war from the shadows using the small folk as a weapon. This all leads to the food riots that Alicent and Helena get caught up in. I don't mind this scene if I'm being honest. It's fine. It really gets across how out of control the war is getting for both sides at this point. What I like is we are starting to see the real impact of the war on the Smallfolk. What I'd love to see is it taken a step further at some point and show the real impact and how desperate things can get in a siege. I'm thinking they can maybe do something like this in the conflict in the Reach, or hell, maybe even Tumbleton. This also highlights just how incompetent the men appointed to Aegon's Kingsguard by himself are, his so-called friends. They really did make the situation worse. But not only that, failing at their one job to protect the queens. Now, the scene where the Kingsguard cuts the arm off a member of the Smallfolk, grabbing Alicent. If you've read the books, then when I say he's the shepherd, or at least I think he is, then you know what I mean. Once again, the show taking the time to lay the groundwork for a major plot point in Season 3. Now, I really love this little scene between Alicent and Gwaine. We really haven't explored the relationship between the pair, but I really like Gwaine as a character. He seems like an all-round good guy. I like his kind of sarcastic nature. This is the final part of this episode where Alicent is questioning her ability as a mother. We get a nice long conversation about Daeron. They really are hyping him up now, just as much as the fans are, and I really hope the writers don't disappoint when time does come for him to make his debut next season. This was a huge move not to include him up until this point, and they're really going to have a lot of work to do to get fans to like and invest in his story very quickly. Not an easy task at all, but I really think if they can do a half-decent job and ensure they cast a good actor, then he really could be the highlight of next season. An interesting observation is the one son who is described as kind is the one son who grew up away from King's Landing and its politics, but also, in turn, grew up away from his mother. So I do wonder if this is going to deepen Alicent's questioning of her motherhood even further. We get news at Harrenhal that Grover Tully has died, which is the news that Daemon has been praying for. Interestingly, Simon Strong tells us how Alys Rivers tried to help Grover, which of course, given what we know of Alys and Daemon, means she sped along his departure from this realm. This is significant in multiple ways. First off, this puts any theories about Alys being a ghost or that only Daemon can see her out of possibility now that she's been directly named by Simon. But if she did kill Grover to help Daemon, again this makes me question her motives even more and wonder how this will influence her role in the story to come. I'm also not sure on the exact timeline here, but in my head 3 days from Harrenhal to Riverrun is, well, quite quick. Maybe Alys really is a barn owl like she claims. What is also very telling is the sheer relief on Daemon's face that the situation is now resolving, and his journey of development is almost now complete. It, to me, shows how much Daemon has been changed by his stay at Harrenhal. I was low-key kind of bummed out we never got to see Addam actually physically claim Seasmoke, but I do like the way it was done. It kind of felt like Seasmoke chose Addam, which really gives more weight to the idea of dragons having a lot more free will than we thought before. I'm not going to go down the Laenor Velaryon rabbit hole here, and the issue with him still being alive in the show. I've made several videos on this topic, but I think for my own sake, I'm choosing just to ignore this element, unless it's addressed at some point down the line. But I do think it's something the writers are just hoping fans are not going to question too much. So far, the sowing of the dragonseeds has been very different from the book, and I am wondering how they're going to play out next week. It seems Addam in the show is not going to be part of the sowing proper, and Rhaenyra currently has no idea who he is. I expect this will be how Corlys acknowledges Addam and Alyn, but I suspect next week we will get the rest of the book sowing of the dragonseeds. Now, the final scene in this episode is one of the most interesting, but also most puzzling. Getting to hear Mysaria's horrific backstory was so much worse than I thought it would be. I assumed from what we knew of her from Season 1, she may have been a sex worker in Essos, and her scars were as a result of that. We know how poorly they can be treated in some of the free cities, and how rampant slavery is in Essos. The fact this was all as a result of her father is so harrowing and so much worse. And this is a really hot take. How much can we actually trust Mysaria? For the most part, I do believe the story she is telling is true, but there's part of me, that little theory crafting part of my mind, that thinks there could be more to this. Now, here I'm going to talk about some spoilers, so just a heads up. Given that it seems Nettles is being dropped from the show, with much of her character now being given to Rhaena in claiming Sheepstealer, there has been a big question. What's going to happen with the other parts of her story you can't do with Rhaena, such as Rhaenyra getting jealous of her relationship with Daemon? As her supposed relationship with Daemon is a big reason as to why Rhaenyra comes to mistrust the dragonseeds, and a key pillar in Rhaenyra's mental decline. What if they could be giving this element of Nettles' story to Mysaria, who we know already has a pre-established relationship with Daemon? with the mistrust of her being part of Rhaenyra's mental decline in the show? What if her relationship with Daemon causes that divide? I'm not sure how that would help the dragonseed plotline at all, but at least that part of Nettles' story is being told and won't have an impact on Daemon's story in the long run. I don't know, just an idea. But I could see them doing something like this. Like I said, while I mostly believe what Mysaria says about her past, it would not surprise me if it was in fact not true, and she is intentionally manipulating Rhaenyra for her own gain. Maybe with this coming to light when Rhaenyra reunites with reformed Daemon and he starts to see a bit of tension between the three of them. So while her backstory seems inconsequential, it could in time become vital. Now the kiss between Rhaenyra and Mysaria has proven very divisive. For many correct reasons, but also many wrong reasons. Hell, if you look at the IMDb scores, this episode sits at a 6.4, making it one of the worst episodes of the HBO shows, down with the likes of Season 8 at its worst. This episode really wasn't that bad. It wasn't great, but wasn't that bad. When you look at the score breakdown, it's mostly people either giving it a 1 star or people giving it a 10, with it balancing out somewhere around 6.4. But the fact that that's happened paints a picture. I personally have no issue with the idea and the concept of the kiss. There is some book lore that could support this kind of thing happening, and given how they've characterised Rhaenyra, is not totally out of the blue. Here is the huge issue, and something that is being looked over in a lot of the online discourse. I think the context of the kiss is really, really poor and utterly out of left field in that specific scene. And I must stress this, in that specific scene. Something just doesn't sit right with it. As for me, it's really bizarre. They do this kiss as a direct result of Mysaria opening up about her frankly horrific past with her sexual exploitation and abuse by her father as a child. How we go from that conversation to them kissing is very jarring to me. So yeah, it doesn't land well with me at all. That's why I'm saying the issue isn't necessarily the kiss, but the kiss being specifically part of this scene. If they did want to do this, they could have just done it at a different point in another scene. Just not during this scene, where it makes the least amount of narrative sense, given the context of the conversation that's literally just happened. Now, we have been told the kiss was improvised on set by the actors, and, well, you can definitely tell due to the juxtaposition with the events of the scene prior to the kiss. I can tell the writers didn't write this, but the fact this made it past the edit does baffle me somewhat. It's possible the writer's strike could have been an issue here. After the actors came up with the idea with this improvisation, if the writers ended up liking the concept and wanting to create a scene to do it properly, then due to the writer's strike, they might not have been able to. That's why I guessed if they wanted to do the kiss this season, it kind of had to be this scene where it was improvised. Plus, also, in truth, I'm not really sure how much the writer's strike affected the show, with it being produced in the UK. But yeah, I can see what they were trying to do with it, and the meaning behind it for Rhaenyra as a character. Just, it doesn't stick the landing being part of that specific scene. But again, different people have different interpretations of issues like this. You may love it regardless of the issues, and you know what? That's completely fine. Everyone is entitled to their own interpretation and their own opinions. Whether you agree with me or I agree with you, at the end of the day, doesn't really matter. It's how you feel and what you think. And no one can force you to like something or hate something you don't want to. At the end of the day, I don't want this just to be a throwaway thing to be forgotten. I hope this means something and they do build upon it in some fashion. This kiss is then interrupted by the news that Seasmoke has been claimed, with Rhaenyra thinking it may be the Greens and racing off to confront them. Like most of this season, this episode was okay. Some good, some bad, some really out of left field stuff. Yes, I do think pace is an issue this season, but not necessarily the biggest issue. If people felt more connected to the characters, if they were written in a more compelling way, pace does not matter near as much. There were slow episodes of Game of Thrones in the early seasons as well, but because the dialogue was so well written and the characters so well realised, it didn't really matter that much. When I think about what House of the Dragon had to do with Season 2 and the part of Fire and Blood they were specifically adapting for it, I'm not really surprised they're having issues getting 8 episodes out of it, especially when you have to try and give screen time to characters who during this part of the book are literally doing very little. I think this theme would carry on for the rest of Season 2, but Given what we should cover during Season 3, I hope it won't share these same issues. I have a lot of thoughts about the structure of the season and moving from 10 to 8 episodes and how that impacted the season, but that will be part of my larger season review in a few weeks. But I do think that these last 2 episodes will be much more on the level with the better episodes of this season, given what we know they're about to cover. So, carrying on with the theme of my ratings this season, I think 7 out of 10 is again a very fair score. Average, but not awful.